Would you like to introduce yourself?
My name's Tony Ingram. I live here in Emory. I've been in Emory since 2014. What brought me over here was my law enforcement job, looking for, chance of advancement. After 30 years, I retired a couple years ago from Emory. So I have a total of 30 years of experience in law enforcement, which includes being a supervisor, being a chief, and then I also have spent 23 years in the Air Force and Air Force Reserves, and I retired out of there in 2017. So I love the little community. My wife's family was from over here, so that's what led to us to move into this area. And I've always been the kind of person that likes the little cities, the little areas. I've never been one for the big cities.
Okay, and with the position of JP, what do you see as the biggest challenge you'll face in this role, and how do you plan to handle it?
I think right now one of the biggest challenges we have, and I think it's for the county in general, is we have a big black eye of corruption, and I want to come in and remove that and do my best. In the job for JP, a lot of people are not going to understand some of the decisions you make, and I think there's a lack of communication there. I think we need to be more open to discussions, and we've lost the ability to agree to disagree, but I think explanation is the biggest thing.
Okay. And so when you find yourself in a situation, because you've obviously not been a JP before, I didn't
Correct.
hear you list that, right? So when you find yourself in a situation where you do not have experience with it, how do you plan on approaching it to move it forward?
So, and that's a good question. I think a lot of things people don't realize how close the JP is in relationship to knowing all the laws of being in law enforcement, because let's say 90% of what a JP does, I've already accomplished being in law enforcement, making decisions on like probable cause, looking at subordinates' traffic tickets. Did they do what they were supposed to? But I also know a couple of the JPs that are over in Wood County, and that is my biggest thing. If I'm elected, I already have knowledge that I can tap into for the things that I don't know. It's kind of like moving from a department to a department. You're a law enforcement, or even let's say JP, everybody when you move, you may know the job, but your paperwork and your policies are going to change each place you go. So I think as far as that goes, I don't have a learning curve when I go into the office. It would be the paperwork, but I think the biggest thing is I bring a wealth of knowledge, and I'm hoping that the public sees that. We don't, because when you're first learning, you make mistakes, and I think this is an office where you can't afford to make mistakes, because you're dealing with the livelihoods of people, and your decisions are not going to be happy with one of the parties, but as long as you follow your rules and your laws, I think you stand on your own ground.
Okay. And there are limits to this position's authority.
Correct.
So how do you plan to work within those limits to still create a positive outcome for the county?
You say the limits, and I think that's also another. We handle Class Cs that are only fines. We handle the tenant landlord disputes, civil cases up to $20,000, and I think therein lies. You need to inform the public, and I think if you just take a little extra time talking to the people when you're making your decisions, they may not agree with it or they may not get happy, but as long as you are trustworthy and you follow the law, I think that's our biggest thing, is trying to do what's right, no matter what happens.
Okay, and so you mentioned, kind of reaching out to others when you have a difficult decision to make.
Yes.
So how do you weigh it when you have conflicting advice?
Research. I think there's enough knowledge out there that you do your research, and there's opinions, like Attorney General opinions on everything. I think whichever, you have two people that give you conflicting advice, if both of them are in the law, I think the biggest thing is just rely on what you know and what you read. I mean, even in all the jobs, there's always been a time where people they don't agree on what you're talking about, so you just have to go with what you feel is right. As long as you don't feel like you violated anything, stand on their own 2 feet.
Okay. When you have made a decision and it draws in public criticism, how do you feel you'll handle that personally and professionally?
I think it's back to communication. There are going to be decisions that we make that people don't like, and I think that's where, when you're a public official on any level, that you're going to have to realize is just your integrity and honesty. That's what means the most to me. And it has cost me at times, but just how do you say it? Just be trustworthy and be transparent. That's what I was looking for.
So I'm not sure how much the JPs are involved with, funding, things like that, but how do you feel you're going to handle decisions or issues that have to be prioritized based off of time, funding, and limited resources?
The funding part, you're correct. Our budgets are set by the commissioners and the judge. And I think if you see an issue that's arising during your term as far as budgeting concerns go, then when we start our next budget discussions, that's where you would address it.
Okay. So tell me about a project or a situation that you were a part of that didn't go as planned. What did you learn and how did you recover from it?
Well, I had a chance to go for advancement, and I believe that I didn't get it because I stuck to my integrity and my morals. Some things happened I didn't agree with, and I think that in the end that caused me to not be elected for that position. I also think it's a learning curve. I mean, rejection is part of life. I think that's some of the things that people are not remembering, that you're going to be told no sometimes. Decisions are going to be made that affect you personally and emotionally, and I think you have to put it behind you and just move on. As long as somebody's not breaking the law or anything like that, let's say rejection is the easiest way to say it. It's part of everyday life. I just chuck it up and move on and go, and don't dwell on the past too long, because then I think it just makes you a bitter person.
Okay. And can you give an example of a time that you've worked with someone that you strongly disagreed with and how you were able to come up with a solution?
I think that going back on the military as well, there's times that you work with people you're not going to agree with them. Let's say neither way is right or wrong. Maybe try both solutions and see which one's the best, or just like we were talking earlier, reach out to somebody else and ask their opinion. I mean, I think in the end, as long as you do what's right, whether you agree or disagree with the way it was handled, I think moves you forward, knowing that in your heart that they may have not liked what you said, but the outcome was still best for everybody involved.
Okay. And with us being a country community and having much smaller communities in our county, how do you feel you'll approach giving a voice to those that don't have such a loud voice?
I think as we get older, I think social media will continue to grow, and I think it's whether you like social media or not, I think one of the problems is how to get your voice out there, and then sometimes only one side of the situation is heard, because either a lack of ability to get on there or somebody's blocking you or whatever. I think that's our biggest thing. We have lost the ability to communicate in whatever form. That's our biggest issue. And I had a question the other night. One of the things I'd like to do to make it easier for the residents, especially like those over in East Waukene, is we call it e-filing. People can file for their cases from their house by electronic means as long as they follow the rules and do everything they're supposed to, and it cuts down on their time so that they don't have to drive all the way to Emory. Even though we are a small rural community, there's a lot of people that don't like to drive. And if you're busy during the day, then you can file at any point. And another one would be to have like a night court ever so often, just so that those people that can't afford to take a break during the day and lose money can show up at night. And we're not like, and I know there's budgetary constraints, but I believe there's a way to do it without it costing the county any extra money. But there's 2 clerks in the office. It wouldn't be that big of a deal to have one of them come in later to to work past a certain point in the night, and we're still within our 40 hours a week.
And outside of the election, how do you plan to stay connected with the residents?
Talking, being seen, and that's like it all. I think it all goes back to communication. I know it sounds like I'm giving the same answer, but I think that is where we're having an issue. People have got to communicate, express what they want or their feelings, and then go from there. When you stop listening to your constituents and all that, there's a huge disconnect, and that's what I do want to fix, is to be heard and spoken with the people.
Okay. And how do you feel you'll handle situations where a decision could benefit someone that you know personally, politically, or financially?
So we have the ability to ask other JPs to come in, and if I have a few of those cases, I would set those cases off, explain why I'm doing it, and then I would reach out to the other JPs that I know and ask them to come in. I know it's been done before in the past, and I personally think that's the way it should be done. I don't think we should have any, how do you say it? I don't want anybody to think that I have any feelings towards one side or the other. I want to relieve any conflict or that might lead anybody to think that I made my decision based on political views, friendship, or past acquaintances.
Okay. And how do you balance data, expert guidance, and lived experience when making decisions that affect the county?
To me, it's kind of a broad question to me. I think the decisions that we make won't affect the county in a whole. It's going to affect each individual that's in front of us. And as long as we stay within what our roles as a JP are, and as long as we stick to our morals and our integrity, and I think that's one thing that's a lot of people are questioning, is our integrity as a administrative county as a whole. And when I go home at night, I know that I did my best, stayed within the purviews of the law, and that even though some people are not going to like the decisions that I make, they were done with integrity.
Okay. At the end of your term, how should residents measure whether you were successful in this role?
I think one of the ways is if you file for office again and you're reelected, then I think the people,
right,
they have looked at what you've done and they like it, and they'll put you in office again. And I know it's the Facebook's very popular and a lot of people are posting on it, but I think in the end, communication, how you're doing, I think people will talk. If they come to court, they may not like your decision, but as long as they say, well, he ruled honestly and fairly, I think that's what matters in the end.
Okay. If you could realistically accomplish only one meaningful thing, one meaningful improvement, whatever that may be, during your term, what would it be and why?
I mentioned that already. I think if the only thing I could accomplish would be the e-filing. I've had several people ask me, and they have a hard time trying to find the time to get up there to the office. It's come up about Commissioner's Court. They talk about having court at night, and I believe the e-filing would help a lot of people. I talked to a couple that used to do rent houses, and they said that was one of their issues when they still owned their houses, was having the time to get up there. I think that is one of the things that one of the first things I want to look at is instituting is e-filing, to make it easier on people, and at least that much time and effort and your cost would be erased by just being able to file it and send it in.
Okay, excellent. So there have been a lot of questions asked on Facebook, other places I'm sure online. Are there any of those questions that you've seen that you would like to take a moment to address?
I know the comment's been made several times that having no kids or family allows you to give 100% to the job. And I just want to state that I love my family and I love my kids, and I do not think they are a burden of any kind. I give 100% to my job no matter what, but I also give 100% to my family. And I think that I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. I've made arrangements with my family and my wife during that time, and it's not going to be an issue. As a matter of fact, being the JP will probably be less call-outs compared to what I was when I was in law enforcement. Because when I worked here in Emory, I would get called a bunch because I lived in town, and it was easier than trying to wait for somebody to come from out of town. So having a family is not an issue.
Okay. And is there anything else that you would like to say to the people out there, and just take a moment and chat with them? And
I would like for the people to actually research what a justice of the peace does and how much experience that I think you need When the position was created in the 1800s, our laws were simple. They're not simple anymore. And I know that the JPs go through a 40-hour class, but I don't think 40 hours is enough to teach you how to do your job. When I went through law enforcement, it was almost 4 months, not including your FTOs. And I think you see that they've also instituted, which occurred with our county, when everything happened and Judge Franklin was suspended. They can't reach out just to find anybody to fill the position. They had to reach out and find somebody that had at least 4 years of JP experience, and that was required by the state. So that tells me, and I would like to convey that to the public, that yes, experience does matter. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to reach out for somebody that's got at least 4 years. I think it's kind of one of the ways they fix like a shortfall of the older laws with the newer laws, and that I bring 30 years of experience to a job that is a very important part of our county, and I don't think you have it shouldn't be where mistakes can be made, because this job affects people's livelihoods, and I think you need to go in with as much knowledge as you can before you start.
Okay, excellent. Anything?
No, ma'am.
Awesome.